Hi, it's Katrina. Ancient statues of San Agustin. Thousands of years ago, the southern part of Colombia was home to a mysterious civilization. Covering 250 square miles, the area is full of stone statues guarding burial sites that date back to over 2,000 years ago. But who built this place? Very little is known about the Andean culture that once lived here, but they left behind some of the most important and mysterious sculptures in South America. There are around 600 statues and at least 40 large burial mounds spread throughout the area. Some of the statues range from 1.6 feet tall to as high as 23 feet tall, depicting all kinds of creatures and human figures, gods, and perhaps even monsters. There are many different styles of sculptures, with some very realistic and others more abstract. The scarier ones were probably placed there to protect the dead. The statues were first described by a Spanish monk in the 1700s, but the place was already abandoned. Since then, the site has been ransacked by looters, but amazingly, many statues still remain. In this case, there was very little gold to be found. It seems that the people here did not have as much as in other regions, and people lost interest. They are now part of San Agustin Archaeological Park, and you can go and visit yourself. The best way to visit is apparently on horseback, so you can cover as much of the park as possible. King Herod's tomb. King Herod the Great ruled over Judea from 37 to 4 BC and is remembered mostly for his cruelty, having murdered all male infants in Bethlehem to prevent the fulfillment of a prophecy about the birth of the Messiah. Historians have been looking for years for evidence of whether or not this really happened. The only mention of this mass killing is in the book of Matthew. However, it does seem like something he would do, since he did arrange the murder of 3 of his sons, his own wife, and other family members. The search for the tomb of the Judean tyrant was on. He died at his palace in Jericho in 4 BC from a strange, violent illness, and was memorialized in an extravagant funeral at the edge of the Judean desert in Herodium, a complex built by the king on a cone-shaped hill outside Jerusalem. But even after Herodium was discovered in the 1830s, the exact location of Herod's tomb remains a mystery thousands of years in the making. Where is he? At the top of the mountain? Inside of it? Archaeologists from Hebrew University announced that they had found Herod's resting place. The London Daily Mail reported a new discovery may solve the mystery of the Bible's bloodiest tyrant. While they did find a tomb, there was a shattered sarcophagus inside that did not contain any inscriptions identifying its occupant, so it's hard to tell whose it was. Since everything was in such small pieces, it looks like it was deliberately smashed. While experts generally accept the discovery as valid, some doubt the findings based on the tomb's simplicity and small size, which stand in stark contrast to the man's reputation for grandiosity and master planning. Evidence suggests that if it is Herod's tomb, it was destroyed shortly after his death by residents of Judea, who did not miss the tyrannical ruler and finally got the chance to show him how they really felt without risking their lives. Port Arthur. Port Arthur was a 19th century penal colony on the Australian island of Tasmania that began as a small timber station in 1830. At first, the most hardened British criminals were sent there. Then other prisoners in Australia who rebelled or caused problems were also sent there. In theory, it was the worst of the worst, with increased security measures to control the prisoners that were too difficult to handle at more traditional convict stations. This included children as young as 9 years old. The prison was deemed inescapable, and it was expanded in 1855. Unlike other prison stations, which engaged in harsh corporal punishments like whippings, Port Arthur imposed psychological torture in the form of what's known as the separate prison system. Prisoners were forced to wear hoods and remain silent, effectively cut off from any meaningful human contact. This hardline policy was allegedly designed to give inmates a chance to reflect on the behavior that got them there in the first place. Not surprisingly, the lack of sight, sound, and interaction had the opposite of a therapeutic effect, causing many prisoners to become seriously mentally ill. The experimental treatment of this separate prison system ultimately proved that cruel treatment was not only defined by slave labor or physical suffering, and what went on at Port Arthur played a role in the penal reform movement that followed. The prison was abandoned in 1877, and most of its buildings were subsequently auctioned off. People didn't seem to mind, as the site's decay meant the erasing of Port Arthur's dark past. Fires and earthquakes hastened the destruction of some of the buildings, and residents swiftly established a new town, seemingly eager to rebrand the area's reputation. But curious individuals continued to visit the remaining ruins, and what's left of Port Arthur fell under government management during the 1970s. In 2010, the property became a UNESCO World Heritage Site, ensuring the inhumane suffering that went on there will not be forgotten. Helike. Just like the legendary city of Atlantis, the city of Helike was destroyed by angry gods. But this city was well documented, with many written accounts that held clues of what really may have happened. Dubbed the real-life Atlantis of ancient Greece, Helike was an ancient Greek polis, or city-state, located on the northwestern part of the Peloponnesian Peninsula. It was once the leader of the Achaean League, a Hellenistic-era confederation of Greek city-states in the region. Founded during the Bronze Age, Helike was an important economic, cultural, and religious center. Its patron god was Poseidon, the god of the sea and earthquakes, which is unsurprising given the city-state's location in one of Europe's most active earthquake zones. One winter night in 373 BC, Helike suffered a catastrophe that caused all its residents to disappear. Days earlier, all the wild animals had vanished from the area. The city completely sank into the sea, and the only remaining visible remnants were the tops of some buildings sticking out of the water. Ancient people attributed the disaster to Poseidon seeking revenge or punishment. It was most likely an earthquake, followed by a massive tsunami that wiped Helike off the map. Ancient travelers and philosophers wrote that although the city was gone, its walls were still visible underwater, and that a bronze statue of Poseidon was a hazard to fishermen's nets. Over time, people could no longer find it. Finally, in 2001, the city was found again. It was not confirmed to be Helike until 2012, when its destruction layer was uncovered. Excavations are ongoing and will hopefully show us what this ancient lost city once looked like. Mayan ceremonial complex. Last year, a groundbreaking study announced the discovery of the oldest and largest monumental structure ever found in the Maya region. It was a 3,000-year-old earthen platform containing a series of structures, including a 13-foot-tall pyramid. Archaeologists discovered the structure in 2017 in Mexico's Tabasco state, roughly 850 miles east of Mexico City. Thanks to LiDAR, a technology that detects structures underground, even through thick vegetation, researchers are able to see more than they have before, without having to go and explore sites in person. As it turns out, the complex sat undetected in plain sight in a semi-forested area for centuries or longer. People had been there in person, actually, but it was so covered and dense that nobody had a clue. Archaeologist and lead study author Takeshi Inomata told National Geographic, "It's fairly hard to explain, but when you walk on the site, you don't quite realize the enormity of the structure. It was so big, they just thought it was a hill. It's over 30 feet high, but it's so wide that you don't even realize it." Radiocarbon dating analysis put the construction of the site at around 1000 BC, and no older buildings were found in the area, suggesting that the Maya lived in temporary structures before then, moving from one area to the next as hunter-gatherers. But something happened that made them build an enormous permanent structure. Inomata estimates the total volume of the platform and buildings to be about 130 million cubic feet, making it larger than the biggest pyramid in Egypt. The place was somewhere for people to gather as a ceremonial center. It most likely involved processions and parades and rituals that we can only imagine. Montgomery mining town. Founded in 1861 at 10,873 feet above sea level, the former gold mining town of Montgomery, Colorado was once the place to be. Located 13 miles south of Breckenridge, it housed as many as 1,000 residents at its peak, boasting both a saloon and a hotel. But people go where the money goes, and once the gold dried up towards the end of the 1860s, residents began relocating to nearby mining camps and elsewhere in hopes of striking a fortune. The discovery of silver at Montgomery briefly revived its prosperity, but the silver crash of 1893 prompted people to set their sights on other dreams. By the end of the 19th century, Montgomery was completely abandoned. The city of Colorado Springs ultimately purchased the land that the town once sat on and intentionally flooded it in 1957, dubbing the newly created body of water the Montgomery Reservoir. To the naked eye, all that exists today is a lake and a handful of remaining buildings that surround it, including 5 of Montgomery's sawmills. But unless you're looking for these buildings, it would be easy to visit the site and not have any clue that an entire town used to be there. The bulk of Montgomery's remains and the untold stories they come with lie beneath the water's surface. The submerged ruins will eventually most likely be forgotten about. Missing city. Cannibal Darband is a lost city that has been missing for over 2,000 years. It was conquered by Alexander the Great himself on his way to battle Darius III, the last king of the Achaemenid Empire of Persia in 331 BC. Located in modern-day Iraqi Kurdistan, the site was a fortified settlement and a popular trade route. Surprisingly, over time, it was lost. In 2017, archaeologists from the British Museum announced the rediscovery of Cannibal Darband thanks to drone technology and declassified spy documents. Lead archaeologist John McGuinness told The Times that the team believes that the site was once a bustling city on a road from Iraq to Iran, adding you can imagine people supplying wine to soldiers passing through. McGuinness and his team analyzed declassified images taken as part of the Corona Spy satellite program. Operating from 1960 to 1972, it was the first U.S. photo reconnaissance satellite program. The images became publicly available in 1995. Excavating the site did not become safe until 2016, however, due to the effects of the Saddam Hussein regime and the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq. Based on imagery alone, featuring pottery fragments and buildings constructed in the Greco-Roman style, experts determined that the site was occupied during the Parthian period. Further investigations using drones revealed the presence of underground walls from a large fortified building beneath modern-day wheat and barley fields. Real-life excavations are ongoing as the world waits to hear the ancient city's untold stories. Xanadu. Located north of China's Great Wall and about 220 miles north of Beijing, the ancient Chinese site of Xanadu, also called Xiandu, contains the remains of Mongol ruler Kublai Khan's legendary capital city. Originally called Kaiping, it was designed with the goal of assimilating northern Asia's nomadic Mongolian and Han cultures with agrarian civilizations, and it's where Kublai Khan established the Yuan dynasty, which ruled China for over a century. The site played a major role in the spread of Tibetan Buddhism throughout Northeast Asia, which has persisted in some places into modern times. It was designed in traditional Chinese feng shui and includes temples, palaces, tombs, nomadic encampments, and various canals. Marco Polo visited Xanadu in 1275 while it was still inhabited and described the incredible site to Europeans. The city was conquered in 1369 under Zhu Yuanzhang, the founding emperor of the Ming dynasty. All that's left of Xanadu are ruins surrounded by the former city walls, which remain visible only as a grass mound. Nevertheless, it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2012 for its visible history of the fusion between different cultures, as well as the society's ability to cohabitate peacefully. Restoration efforts have been underway since 2002 in hopes of reviving the ancient city's story. Scarrabrae. Located on Scotland's west coast, Scarrabrae is a stone-built Neolithic settlement consisting of 10 clustered flagstone houses situated within earthen dams. The settlement contains a primitive sewer system with basic toilets and drains inside each home, which carried human waste into the ocean. Occupied from 3180 BC to 2500 BC, Scarrabrae is Europe's most complete Neolithic village. It's older than both Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids, offering an incredibly rare glimpse into the life of past civilizations. Scarrabrae was discovered in the winter of 1850 after a severe storm, when residents spotted the outlines of the village and several small dwellings. 4 houses were excavated before the site was abandoned in 1868. Then, in 1913, the site was looted, and the plunderers made off with numerous artifacts that never got their chance to enter the historical record. Later on, another storm exposed more of the site, finally prompting officials to take action to protect it from further damage. Subsequent excavations revealed that Scarrabrae's inhabitants used a type of pottery called grooved ware, which is distinctive to northern Scotland. Their houses were sunken into earthen walls, which protected the structure from the elements and provided added stability. The homes are tiny by today's standards, measuring just 430 square feet on average. Besides being equipped with a basic toilet, each dwelling contains a hearth that was used for heating and cooking. Experts estimate that no more than 50 people lived in Scarrabrae at any given time, given its small size. It's believed that Scarrabrae may have been abandoned around 2500 BC amid a cooling climate, prompting its residents to seek shelter somewhere more hospitable. But it's unknown why the settlement was deserted, and theories abound, including the possibility that a major storm prompted the exodus. The CrackedCorinthian Helmet. You probably wouldn't expect to find an ancient Greek helmet in Russia. However, surprise, surprise, one was recently discovered in a grave in the southwest of Russia that dates back to the 5th century BC. The helmet is in the Corinthian style, made completely of bronze, with widened slits for the eyes and a covering to protect the neck, just like the Spartan helmets you see on TV and in movies. Its interior is also padded to protect the skull and face of the warrior. The helmet would have been used by the Greek warrior hoplites, which were the famous foot soldiers in the Greek phalanxes. This particular helmet was found fractured and broken, yet still in pretty amazing shape. It is the only one of its kind ever found north of the Black Sea. Around the 5th century, the Greeks were establishing a kingdom in the area that would come to be known as the Kingdom of Bosporus. These types of helmets are one of the most well-known symbols of ancient Greece. The Corinthian helmet appeared in the 6th century BC and is often seen in artistic depictions being worn by the goddess Athena. Whenever a warrior died, it was the custom to bury him with his helmet by his side. According to the director of the expedition from the Institute of Archaeology of the Russian Academy of Sciences, this was one of the earliest models of this style of helmets. It was discovered while archaeologists were studying a necropolis of about 600 burial mounds on the Taman Peninsula. This place retained a strong sense of Greek identity, even though they often were in close contact with others, such as the Scythians, which also greatly influenced them over the years. Even though this helmet was not found in perfect condition, it is still of great historical significance. 1,000-year-old couple. An ancient tomb has recently been uncovered in China, revealing one of the oldest couples ever found buried together in a romantic embrace. This is the epitome of romantic archaeology. A husband and wife were found lying side by side in connecting graves, with heads each placed gently on a tile pillow and their bodies reaching out in a final gesture of love. This tomb dates back 1,000 years, and it was discovered at an ancient cemetery in the Hunan province in China. The bodies were also found with some pieces of pottery that date back to between 960 and 1127 AD. The grave was initially excavated by archaeologists in anticipation of a motorway that will open in the year 2022. It was a routine excavation before construction, but now the race is on to get as much out as possible before everything gets ruined. Yang Ningbo, the lead archaeologist at the site, told news sources that it is extremely rare to find a couple buried together in such a way. But what makes the discovery exceptionally rare is something called a fairy window, which is essentially just a window carved through the dividing wall of the two graves, designed to allow the couple to continue their romance once they make it to the afterlife. But who was this couple? There were only a few grave goods found with them, indicating they were normal civilians. But the fact that they were buried with anything at all in a very nice stone tomb indicates that they must have had some wealth, or that someone rich bought the tomb for them. And while these two graves were definitely the highlight of the excavation, there were still other graves discovered in the area. These graves were even older, with some of them dating back to 25 AD, during the Eastern Han Dynasty. The oldest dog. Back in 1998, researchers excavating a cave on the western coast of Alaska looking for the remains of prehistoric bears unearthed a small chip of bone. This piece of bone was cataloged and put away until it was just recently inspected using modern DNA techniques. Scientists have now discovered that this old archaeological discovery is proof that humans migrated to North America about 16,000 years ago and brought their dogs along with them. This has really changed the game on the initial thought that humans first arrived in the Americas 12,000 years ago when the northern glaciers began to melt. Scientists now know that the ancient Siberians actually traveled through the Alaskan archipelago 4,000 years before that, making their way down the Pacific coast and bringing man's best friend along with them. According to the team leader on this study, Charlotte Lindqvist, a biologist working with the University of Buffalo, they first thought the shard of bone was from a bear. It wasn't until much later that they realized it was actually from a dog. And now they know that the dog lived 10,200 years ago and is the oldest recorded dog in the Americas. Researchers are saying that the dog's genome has revealed that it was once related to the first known dogs on Earth, which were domesticated about 23,000 years ago in Siberia. And this discovery gets even cooler. Scientists did even more digging, and they discovered that based on the genetic differences between the Alaskan dog and its much older Siberian ancestors, the two dogs split from the same population 16,700 years ago and went down their own paths of evolution. Ancient balls. An international team of curious archaeologists have discovered something a little strange in China. They found 3 leather balls inside a series of tombs near the city of Turfan in the Chinese northwest. These balls were found at the prehistoric Yanghai Cemetery, and they measure only about 3 inches in diameter. about the size of a tennis ball. Each one has a hard core of leather or hair. They are enclosed inside a leather casing, and they were once sealed with bands to remain tight. And while this might seem a little boring, the truth is that the balls have mystified and confused archaeologists ever since they were found. Nobody is quite sure what these weird balls were used for. They may have been utilized in ancient Chinese games of skill, like tennis, or they may have been used by ancient jugglers. I mean, nobody really knows, so your guess is as good as mine. It was probably some part of a mysterious lost game. The turfan balls, as they are being called, date back to between 1189 and 911 BC, predating every other antique ball found. In fact, they are about 500 years older than the first archaeological evidence of humans playing games with balls in Eurasia. Dr. Patrick Wertmann from the University of Zurich says that ball games in ancient societies were some of the best ways of getting physical exercise as well as enforcing military training. Dr. Wertmann has suggested that these three mysterious round artifacts were used in some sort of game that involved horses, as the balls appeared in the region around the same time that horseback riding became popular. Maybe they were the first to play polo, or maybe they threw the ball to each other while riding horses? I mean, the possibilities are endless. Ancient goose art. Normally, extinct animals are discovered because of fossils found by paleontologists. However, a researcher from the University of Queensland recently found an extinct species of goose after examining an Egyptian painting from 4,600 years ago. It all happened when the speckled goose in the painting caught Dr. Anthony Romilio's eye. He noticed that the beautiful bird was unlike modern geese that live near Egypt today. The geese depicted in the painting have bolder colors, more intricate patterns, and a generally more distinctive appearance. Here's why the discovery is so fascinating. The painting is known as the Maydam geese, and it has been admired since its discovery in the 1800s. It has even been described as Egypt's Mona Lisa for its amazing artistic display. But throughout the last 200 years, nobody realized that there was an unknown species of goose depicted in the brushstrokes. The surrounding animals are painted in a very realistic way, so the question is, what animal was this? According to Dr. Romilio, there have been no bones from these geese found at any archaeological sites in Egypt. However, bones very similar to modern red-breasted geese, but not quite identical, have been found on the Greek island of Crete. The suggestion here is that Egypt may have been teeming with diverse animals 4,000 years ago. It's important to note that the ancient Egyptian culture came from a time when the Sahara Desert was more green and lush than it is today. There were elephants, giraffes, cattle, and apparently one particularly extinct goose. Ancient Europeans mysteriously vanish. According to new archaeological findings published in the journal Nature Communications, and also based on skeletons that were unearthed in Europe dating back 7,500 years ago, the genetic lineage of Europe mysteriously transformed about 4,500 years ago. The new evidence is suggesting that the first European culture was suddenly replaced at this juncture, and nobody knows why. The co-author of the study, Alan Cooper from the University of Adelaide, Australia Centre for Ancient DNA, said in a statement that something huge happened, and archaeologists are now trying to figure out what exactly it was. Scientists used mitochondrial DNA samples from 37 skeletal remains from both Germany and Italy. What they found was that the earliest farmers living in Germany were related to the Anatolian people from modern Turkey. This means that many people from Turkey replaced the hunter-gatherers of early Europe. But then, something replaced them between 5,000 and 4,000 years ago. Researchers are saying it may have had something to do with the bell beaker culture, starting at around 2,800 BC. They appeared in Holland and spread across Western and Central Europe. For example, in the UK, they completely replaced the Neolithic farmers responsible for building Stonehenge, who were from the Mediterranean and had more olive skin and dark hair and eyes. While there is no evidence that the Beaker people were violent and did it on purpose, they may have brought disease that wiped out the people who were already there. Based on the DNA evidence of early skeletons, there was a huge migration and genetic turnover in the population of Europe, likely caused by more advanced humans moving into the region and wiping out the primitive farmers and hunter-gatherers. Viking warrior women. A grave in Sweden from the age of the Vikings has recently been discovered to hold the remains of a respected female warrior from the 10th century. This archaeological evidence has confirmed that women held prominent positions in the culture of the ancient Vikings. The amazing discovery was revealed by researchers working at Stockholm University after analyzing the DNA of the female skeleton, which revealed that she was about 30 years old when she died and no taller than 5 feet 6 inches. Hey, that's my height. She was found buried with a small hoard of weapons, including a battle axe, a spear, a pair of shields, a sword, and arrows designed for piercing armor. This woman was without a doubt a fearless Viking warrior, and scientists are saying she was not the only one. While many people already thought this was the case, there was very little evidence to support this. According to Professor Matthias Jacobsen, this discovery was the first formal confirmation of a true Viking female warrior. Scientists have known for a long time that women played an important role in society, but this is the first well-preserved finding. And to make matters even more fascinating, the lady warrior was found with a pair of horses and an ancient board game complete with a full set of game pieces. This suggests that she was a high-ranking woman with deep knowledge of battle strategy and military combat. Mysterious stone gates. Hundreds of fascinating stone gates have been found throughout the remote wastelands of Saudi Arabia, and it was all thanks to archaeologists using Google Earth. Roughly 400 stone structures previously undocumented have now been identified in the Arabian desert, and professional archaeologists are saying they were probably constructed by nomadic tribes many thousands of years ago. According to David Kennedy from the University of Western Australia, Saudi Arabia is not just a desert, but in fact a place with a huge archaeological treasure trove still needing to be identified and mapped. These particular stone gates are visible from the ground, but they become exceptionally clear from above, looking from a plane or at a satellite image. These structures are believed to be at least 2,000 years old, but Dr. Kennedy has said that some could date as far back as 9,000 years. Very little is known about whoever built the structures or what their purpose was in the ancient world, but scientists are saying that they could be the ancestors of the Bedouin people who still live in the region today. One of the best theories that archaeologists can come up with for the purpose of the stone gates is that they were built from loose boulders and used by nomadic tribes for hunting, by funneling stampeding herds of gazelles through a narrow corridor where they would be slaughtered by the warriors to be eaten by the rest of the tribe. The stone gates would have led to hunting on a massive scale and may have even led to the extinction of certain types of migrating animals. Ancient Chinese trousers. The oldest pants in the world have recently been found in an ancient Chinese graveyard by a team of researchers. This happened at the Tarim Basin in western China, a place rich in ancient burial grounds that date back at least 3,000 years. At least that's how old these pants are. Out of all 500 individual grave sites explored in the region, only 2 of them were found to contain dead people still wearing pants. Carbon dating of the pants has revealed them to be the oldest known occurrence of human beings wearing the same type of trousers that we still do today. There were other artifacts found inside the tombs with the trouser-wearing skeletons as well. There was a horsewhip, a bow, and even a battle axe. Researchers are now suggesting that modern pants may have been created to allow people to ride horses for longer periods of time without chafing their skin. The invention of horseback riding incidentally provoked the invention of tailored pants designed to fit a particular person while being comfortable enough to ride around on a horse all day. Basically, you can thank the original horseback riders of ancient China for your comfortable jeans. Lamashtu plaque. Lamashtu was a demon of Mesopotamian mythology and the daughter of the sky god Anu. She menaced women during childbirth and kidnapped their babies while they were breastfeeding. In addition to gnawing on children's bones and sucking their blood, Lamashtu committed numerous other misdeeds, including eating men, interrupting people's sleep, destroying nature, infesting freshwater bodies such as rivers and lakes, and inflicting disease. She's often depicted as having a hairy body, the head of a lioness, and a donkey's teeth and ears, as well as long fingers and fingernails, and bird feet with sharp talons. Images of Lamashtu typically show her atop a donkey, nursing a pig and dog, and with snakes in her hands. So how are you supposed to defend yourself from this monster? This plaque, housed at the Louvre in Paris, was created sometime during the 2nd or 1st millennium BC. It was intended to be hung over someone's bed and designed to protect them against Lamashtu's evil behavior. The plaque's reverse side features Lamashtu's husband and rival Pazuzu, the bearer of storms and drought. He has a man's body, the head of a lion or a dog, eagle's talons, 2 pairs of wings, and a scorpion's tail. As the demon of the southwest wind, Pazuzu was blamed for bringing drought during dry seasons and locusts and storms during rainy seasons. Ironically, despite his sinister qualities, Pazuzu was occasionally invoked for protection from evil. He was known for guarding pregnant women and their children from Lamashtu, which perhaps explains why his likeness is on the reverse side of this Lamashtu tablet, where he is shown overlooking Lamashtu in a protective manner. Mistaken biblical identity. A shocking new study reveals that bones previously thought to belong to St. James the Younger, one of the 12 apostles and possibly Jesus' brother, are a case of mistaken identity. Recent radiocarbon dating results show that the femur fragments, which have resided at the Santi Apostoli Church in Rome for the past 1,500 years, belong to someone else. St. James the Younger lived during the 1st century BC, according to the study which was published in the journal Heritage Science, and the bones date back to sometime between 214 and 230 AD. Our dates, although disproving it was St. James, fall in a dark period between the time when the apostles died and Christianity became the dominant religion in the Roman Empire, lead study author Carl Lund Rasmussen told Life Science. So, whose bones are they? The bones thought to belong to St. James were transported to the Church of Santi Apostoli during the 6th century, but nobody knows where they came from. They were moved along with tibia fragments and a mummified foot, thought to belong to fellow apostle St. Philip. The team decided against attempting to determine the age of the remains believed to be St. Philip's, citing difficulties relating to decontaminating the bones. Although the alleged remains of St. James turned out to be someone else's bones, researchers believe that they do belong to an early Christian. Fish lung. Researchers in Morocco recently examined the fossilized lung of a previously unknown ancient fish species belonging to the mysterious coelacanth order, which was thought to be extinct until someone discovered a live specimen in 1938. The species in question, which is extinct, measured an estimated 17 feet long, almost the size of a great white shark. The evidence dates back roughly 66 million years to the end of the Cretaceous period, when 75% of life on Earth, including the dinosaurs, was wiped out by an asteroid. Study co-author David Martel said that the discovery was made in a place where coelacanths were never found before. Here's where it gets a little confusing. The fossilized lung's owner, a pterosaur collector, originally mistook the specimen as a pterodactyl skull. Upon re-examination, he realized that he might be wrong, and so he contacted Martel for an expert opinion. Martel couldn't tell based on pictures alone what the fossil represented, but once he saw it in person, he suspected that it was a coelacanth lung. Brazilian paleontologist Paulo Brito, a world-leading coelacanth expert, confirmed Martel's suspicions and was reportedly astonished by the size of the specimen. It was bigger than all other known ancient coelacanths, which measured 10 and 13 feet long. Modern coelacanths are much smaller, reaching just 6 feet long. Researchers are unsure where the rest of the fossilized specimen's body ended up, but they believe it may have been eaten, and damage to the lung also indicates that this is a distinct possibility. But as Martel pointed out, there is no way of knowing for sure how the animal died. Ancient cesspit. While conducting preliminary excavations in anticipation of building a new sewer beneath the Courtauld Gallery in London last year, construction workers discovered a giant medieval cesspit at the site. The 15-foot deep pit was filled with a trove of around 100 medieval artifacts dating back to the 14th and 15th centuries, including ceramic vessels, a ring, pendant, belt buckle, forks, and other utensils. The most bizarre artifact found in the pit is a rare medieval tile bearing a depiction of a strange mythical creature with a human head at one end and a leaf-like tail at the other. During different times throughout history, the pit had different uses. It was remodeled into a cellar during the 17th century, and a latrine was added at some point thereafter. Archaeologists from the Museum of London Archaeology are conducting the excavation, which has revealed a lot of new information about the site's past, especially since there are few known existing records from the late medieval era, which include an inaccurate drawing from 1543. These new discoveries are helping experts better understand medieval London settlements and the buildings that were constructed afterward. Simon Thurley, the former chief executive of the English Heritage Charity, said of the discovery, "It's unusual to get excited about a cesspit. It's an incredibly significant find." Lehigh horse. In 2018, landscapers unearthed a horse skeleton in an ancient lake in Lehigh, Utah, in somebody's backyard. Experts originally believed the specimen was a 16,000-year-old mare who roamed the area during the last ice age, but a new study recently found that it was a domestic horse and that the skeleton is no more than 340 years old. Prehistoric wild horses existed in North America starting millions of years ago and went extinct around 10,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age, most likely due to a combination of climate change and human activity. The wild horse populations that exist on the continent today formed after Europeans brought the animals over, and some of them escaped. The lehigh horse died when she was around 12 years old. Native Americans living in the area at the time, perhaps a member of the Ute or Shoshone communities, raised and rode her, lead study author William Taylor told Life Science. He further explained that new radiocarbon dating results put her death at some time after 1680, before Europeans settled in what is now the Salt Lake region. Fractures in the horse's back and severe arthritis point toward the likelihood that she was ridden, as these types of injuries are reportedly rare in wild animals, serving as additional evidence that she lived more recently than the last ice age. An isotope analysis of her teeth showed that she ate local vegetation, indicating that people cared for her. Ancient shell horn. For decades, a large conch shell that researchers now believe may be the oldest known seashell instrument sat unnoticed at a museum. Discovered in a prehistoric cave dwelling in the Marsolas Cave of the French Pyrenees in 1931, the artifact was originally thought to be a drinking vessel. But a recent fresh look at the 12-inch long conch shell revealed that it is no beverage cup, but a wind instrument, and it still plays, despite being roughly 18,000 years old. The team invited a French horn player to try it out, despite archaeologist Carol Fritz's fear that it might break. Thankfully, it didn't, and ABC reported that it played C, C-sharp, and D notes. The researchers, whose findings were published earlier this year in the journal Science Advances, examined the instrument after someone found it during an inventory at the Natural History Museum of Toulouse and noticed that it had several unusual holes in it and that its tip was broken off. Close inspection revealed that the shell had been deliberately altered. This discovery reminds us that their lives were much richer and more complex than just stone tools and big game, archaeologist Margaret Conkey, who was not involved in the research, told ABC. Because Marsolas Cave is far from the ocean, the team concluded that the conch shell made its way there through a trade network, or it was brought there by nomadic prehistoric people. They created a 3D replica of the instrument, which they are using to learn more about the full range of notes it could once play. A personal engraving. While excavating in anticipation of a road construction project in Cambridgeshire, England last year, a team of archaeologists discovered an ancient millstone bearing an engraving of a large phallus. The artifact dates back roughly 2,000 years during the Roman era in Britain. While this may not exactly be most people's idea of art in modern times, it meant something to the people who lived in the area 2 millennia ago. The phallus was seen as an important image of strength and virility in the Roman world, lead archaeologist Steve Sherlock told Cambridgeshire Live, adding that Roman fighters often wore penis-engraved good luck charms before marching onto the battlefield. The rare artifact is one of just 4 decorated Roman millstones that have been discovered throughout Britain, and the latest in a series of baffling discoveries archaeologists have made during the road construction project. Other artifacts that have been found include woolly mammoth tusks, woolly rhino skulls, and evidence that people brewed beer in Britain as early as 400 BC. The objects, which date back to the Neolithic, Bronze and Iron Ages, and Roman, Anglo-Saxon, and medieval periods, also include the second gold coin ever found in Britain that depicts the Roman Emperor Laelianus, who reigned for just 2 months in 269 AD. Maliwa figures. Western Arnhem Land, located in Australia's Northern Territory, is extremely archaeologically rich, containing several thousand rock art sites. New discoveries are made there every year. Last year, researchers described a previously unknown rock art style in the journal Australian Archaeology. Primarily found throughout the northwestern part of the region, the style, called the Maliwa figures, is defined by large naturalistic human and animal figures shaded with stroked lines. The team found 572 Maliwa paintings throughout 87 rock shelters over a distance spanning roughly 80 miles. Writing for The Conversation, the researchers described the figures as typically measuring at least 20 inches high. Some are life-sized, while others are small, measuring just 8 to 20 inches high. They are red to mulberry colored and likely date back between 6,000 and 9,400 years. Most of the images depict humans interacting with animals, with an emphasis on kangaroos and wallabies. These human-animal relationships seem to be the central focus of the paintings, which appear to show animals participating in human activities in some cases, according to the study's authors, who explain that scenes like these in rock art are rare worldwide. The Maliwa figures provide an unprecedented look at how Aborigines lived and their culture and beliefs. Some of the paintings feature extinct animals, including thylacines. Many of the humans in the images are male and can be identified as such based on their genitalia, while the gender of others are unidentifiable and a small number are women. These fascinating discoveries highlight the importance of preserving Australia's often overlooked indigenous artifacts. Human Skull Tower. Archaeologists excavating a building in the center of Mexico City have discovered an Aztec tower of human skulls. Known as Huayzonpantli, it is a circular tower made from human skulls that was part of a skull rack from the temple to the Aztec god of the sun, war, and human sacrifice, Huitzilopochtli. Located near the Templo Mayor archaeological site in Mexico City, which the Aztecs called Tenochtitlan, it measures roughly 16.4 feet in diameter and dates back to the late 15th and early 16th centuries. The site was first uncovered in 2015, and by 2017, archaeologists had discovered 484 skulls. In March of last year, they found 119 more skulls, bringing the total to 603. The skulls belong to men, women, and at least 3 children, according to Rodrigo Bolaños Martinez, an archaeologist with the National Institute of Anthropology and History. It was extremely unusual to find children's skulls. Something is happening that we have no record of, and this is really new, a first in the Huayzonpantli, he said. His team members said that it's likely that some of the skulls belong to individuals who were sacrificed to the Aztec gods, while others were warriors. But through their sacrifice, they all were made sacred, turned into gifts for the gods, or even personifications of deities themselves. The team says that human sacrifices were a daily ritual in Mesoamerica, and that these gory practices were carried out with the purpose of renewing nature and the continuity of life itself. The Aztecs displayed freshly severed heads on zompantli, or skull racks, a practice that was common among several Mesoamerican societies. After they were done being exhibited, the skulls were transferred to the tower. Hernán Cortés and the Spanish conquistadors he led on the conquest of Tenochtitlan in 1521 witnessed human sacrifices and were absolutely horrified by the practice. Researchers believe that the Huayzonpantli is one of 7 similar structures that once stood in the area, based on contemporary accounts of the city's capture by Cortés. They also believe that the conquistadors destroyed the other structures as soon as they could. The Cannibal Skull Cup. People living in a cave in Somerset, England, 14,700 years ago were eating each other, but strangely enough, not for food, but as part of a ritual. Recent archaeological evidence at Gough's Cave has pointed to a sophisticated culture of cannibals who butchered their friends and ate them, according to Dr. Sylvia Bello. But the really amazing thing about these strange cannibals is that they were involved in some of the earliest funerary practices of our species. And this is where the Cannibal Skull Cup artifacts come into play. These are some of the most disturbing artifacts ever found in a cave anywhere. Of course, there were many prehistoric human remains found inside of Gough's Cave, almost all of them showing clear signs of bite and cut marks. The most remarkable thing they did was craft dishes from the bones of people they consumed. 3 skull artifacts were discovered that had been carefully molded into drinking cups and bowls. While this might sound horrific now, making containers like this has been found from the Vikings to the Scythians. Dr. Bello reported that there was also a pattern of zigzag marks carved into bones to make art. There was plenty of meat available, so it seems like this practice was a clear choice. But aside from the disturbing bone bowls and cups, archaeologists also found objects crafted from ivory, reindeer antlers, and the bones of small mammals. The cave's most famous resident was the Cheddar Man, a near-complete skeleton from around 10,000 years ago. Mexican tomb artifacts. At the Monte Alban archaeological site in southern Mexico, researchers found more than 400 valuable artifacts hidden inside of a secret tomb. This was back in 1932, when the famous archaeologist Alfonso Caso stumbled upon what would come to be known as the Treasure of Monte Alban, inside Tomb 7 of the Zapotec site. The amazing artifacts contained within the tomb include relics made of jaguar bones, rock crystal, gold, and even ultra-rare jade. According to the Tomb 7 exhibition curator Nelly Robles, the artifacts were part of an ossuary and not a tomb designed for a certain person. Plus, both Zapotec and the later Mixtec people had use of the tomb, with Mixtec people leaving behind jewels and human remains after the Zapotecs. Both cultures believed that the Mesoamerican god of death and the underworld, Mictlantecutli, and the god of rebirth, Xipetotec, presided over the tomb and kept the treasures safe. The cursed amethyst. The cursed amethyst, also sometimes known as the blasted amethyst, is currently locked up very far from human eyes alongside other precious stones such as the rare Martian meteorite and the Medusa emerald, one of the largest uncut emeralds ever found. The cursed amethyst gets its name from its reputation. The gem was originally stolen during the Indian Mutiny of 1857 from the Temple of Indra in India, and ever since it has been allegedly causing its owners despair and horror. The stone is currently sitting inside the vault of the Natural History Museum in London. It was locked away by its previous owner inside of a bank safe, where it stayed for over 3 years following his death before ultimately being transferred to the museum. But the story of the amethyst goes back much further. It first arrived in England thanks to a cavalryman named Colonel W. Ferris, the guy who stole it from the temple in 1857. After arriving back in England, the colonel apparently suffered great misfortune. Then, so did his son, who inherited the amethyst, and then so did the friend that the colonel's son gave the stone to. Basically, this amethyst is a hot potato of death. To this day, nobody is entirely sure where the jewel came from in the first place. Nobody in the scientific community believes that the curse is real, and it's unlikely that anyone will ever take it out of its hiding place inside the museum vault. Even if you don't believe in curses, the coincidences surrounding those who own the jewel and the misfortune that befell them is hard to ignore. Lead chalice. Archaeologists have recently found the fragments of a lead cup or a chalice, lightly carved with symbols that date back to early Christianity. This is an extremely mysterious artifact, which was found at the site of Vindolanda, an old Roman military fort near Hadrian's Wall in the north of England. 14 fragments in total were found underneath the remains of a Christian church from the 6th century, and according to Dr. David Petz from the Department of Archaeology at Durham University, it is an extremely exciting discovery that comes from one of the most poorly understood periods in all of British history. This singular artifact has created a direct connection between the earliest Christian churches in Britain and the religion's development during the medieval period. The curious marks on the cup are etched on both the inside and the outside, but they are difficult to see without the aid of specialized photographic equipment. It took a lot of work to properly reveal the symbols, which ended up being depictions of ships, crosses, angels, Latin and Greek letters, and what even appear to be members of a congregation. While Vindolanda has had its share of unique firsts, the fact that this chalice survived the post-Roman landscape is significant. Ancient Maya alien artifacts. Last year, rumors spread of strange objects allegedly taken from Maya excavation sites. There were figurines and carvings of Maya warriors sacrificing victims, along with other figures who look very much like aliens. A publication in October 2020 reported that the figurines were found when a rock wall of a cave was demolished with a bulldozer. Then artifacts appeared with figures wearing pre-Columbian motifs, domed heads, and dark oval eyes. They are strangely similar to extraterrestrial representations found in movies. There is not only one alien artifact that has been uncovered from the ancient kingdom of the Maya. There are many, from statues depicting alien beings to strange carvings of what appear to be spaceships and star maps. Though the truth of where the artifacts come from, or how the Maya could have developed the idea on their own, is a total mystery. Since these findings spread like wildfire, Adrián Montemayor, head of information for the National Fund for the Promotion of Tourism, the government institution that supervises the work, joked about the alleged finding in a thread on Twitter on October 11th. We have not found figures of aliens in the archaeological excavations of the hashtag Tren Maya, unfortunately. He said, "I have to clarify that these are contemporary pieces that have no relationship whatsoever with the Mayan periods. They include Mexican symbols from Peru and the United Kingdom. They are made of current materials and have aliens that look like children's figurines." Nevertheless, social media in the Hispanic world is going crazy, with many believing that the government is just trying to hide them from the public. Artifact of the Great Pyramid. When researchers went in to survey the Great Pyramid of Giza, British engineer Wayneman Dixon took 3 artifacts from the Queen's Chamber. A piece of cedar, a ball, and a hook, which are now known as the Dixon artifacts, However, one of the artifacts went missing. Over 70 years later, it was discovered in a rather unusual place. A researcher was going through some objects at the University of Aberdeen Museum in Scotland when she found a small tin box that looked out of place. Inside was a wooden fragment about 5 inches long. It was the long-lost piece of cedar. It was placed in the Queen's chamber when the structure was built and was probably part of a tool used to build the pyramid. Apparently, the fragment and a bronze hook believed to have been used during the construction were donated to the University of Aberdeen sometime in the early 1900s. But the fragment of wood disappeared. Someone had accidentally put it into a cigar box and then shoved it in with other miscellaneous artifacts in the university's Asia collection. The only reason it was discovered is thanks to the Egyptian flag on the cover. Following its discovery, modern carbon dating tests were done to the wood fragment. The results showed that the wood dated back as far as 3,341 BC, which was many years before the construction of the pyramid. This has led researchers to speculate that whatever the wood had been a part of, it was left behind by the earliest builders at the famous site, though even today, nobody knows what kind of tool or instrument the wood fragments came from. Strange Paleolithic bird figurine. A rather peculiar artifact was recently pulled out of a garbage heap. Archaeologists found a Paleolithic bird figure that may just be the oldest three-dimensional Chinese artwork on the planet. Archaeologists are even saying that the existence of this tiny bird shows that the people of China began to make their own artwork independently from other civilizations of the ancient world, somewhere around 13,500 years ago. The bird was first found in the Henan province of China when a pile of trash was being excavated. The trash actually came from a well that was dug by construction crews in 1958. The pile of dirt sat there until 2005, when archaeologists decided it would be a good idea to comb through what the construction crews had left behind. And that was when they found the small Paleolithic bird figurine, carved expertly out of a blackened bone. There were other artifacts in the pile as well, things like pottery shards and stone tools. However, the bird has definitely gotten everyone's attention. It actually pushes the origin of avian art in Chinese history back 8,500 years. According to Luc Doyon from the University of Montreal, archaeologists were struck by the technological feat of the bird and its beauty. Some anthropologists also noted that when a race of people move beyond the basic needs of survival, they begin to create art. This bird could signify the exact time that human beings in China became comfortable enough to stop foraging for food and began making three-dimensional art. It's very interesting to see at which point different cultures in different parts of the world began making sculptures. Sacrificial Altar. The colossal jaguar sculpture currently sitting at the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City was once used as a vessel for hearts that were torn straight out of the chests of sacrificial victims. This intimidating artifact is known as a guajicali, and it was originally carved from a large piece of volcanic rock. It's one of the most striking artifacts ever found, in the likeness of a growling jaguar with its fangs bared and its nostrils wide open. The animal looks as if it's about to pounce on an unsuspecting victim. A guajicali is a type of altar that would have been found at almost every Aztec shrine hundreds of years ago, and these were either in the form of a jaguar or an eagle. In the center of it is a bowl that was used as a vessel in which the high priest would place the heart of the sacrificed victim before burning it as an offering to the Aztec gods. In many Mesoamerican civilizations, the heart was believed to be the physical soul of a human or animal, and so the ritual was a way that the gods could be nourished with the soul of a life form. And considering that the jaguar was an animal with great symbolic importance within the Aztecs' cosmovision, it makes sense that many of these altars were crafted in their likeness. This particular jaguar sculpture was found sometime in the 19th century, and it's believed that it was used primarily in sacrifices involving enemy warriors caught in battle. Bronze Age artifacts. The world's most unlikely archaeologist has made one of the most amazing discoveries in recent memory. The archaeologist's name is Monty, and he is a dog. While out for a walk in a small Czech village, Monty began digging in a field and miraculously came upon a buried cache of amazing Bronze Age artifacts. The dog helped find 13 sickles, 3 axes, 2 spear points, and a large number of bracelets. All of these artifacts are at least 3,000 years old, and according to Smithsonian Magazine, the owner of the dog actually got a small reward of about $360 for turning the artifacts over to the authorities. Considering that so many of the artifacts were found in a single place, the site was most likely used as some sort of sacrifice pit 3 millennia ago. But what surprised archaeologists the most was the incredible shape in which the artifacts were found. found, because normally, the ancient cultures that lived in the area would only bury fragments or even melted fragments of weapons. But all of these artifacts were in perfect condition, making their value even greater. As for where these artifacts came from, archaeologists say they are from the Urnfield period of the late European Bronze Age. The Urnfield period was the time when communities began to cremate their dead and bury them in ceremonial urns. Sunken aboriginal tools. 270 aboriginal artifacts have just been found at 2 different archaeological sites underwater, both of them located off the northwest coast of Australia. These amazing artifacts are about 7,000 years old. They are stone tools which were used by the original people who lived in Australia before Europeans ever landed on the continent. But to understand the incredible significance of this discovery, we first need to take a look back in history. You see, when the Ice Age ended 12,000 years ago, and the glaciers melted and the sea levels rose, at least 30% of the habitable land in Australia was submerged, and as you can imagine, a lot of people were living on that 30% of land. After all, this was coastal land, and there is almost always a community near the coast. It's unclear if the coastal people were decimated by catastrophic flooding, but one thing is for sure, they left behind artifacts and remnants of their culture. Jonathan Benjamin, a professional archaeologist from Flinders University, recently told Business Insider that these artifacts have redrawn the map of what archaeology can do in Australia. No longer are archaeologists restricted to only digging on land or in the shallow water. And even as we speak, Jonathan's team is working hard to dive under the surface of the ocean and find more artifacts, and to decode and understand the aboriginal tools that have already been retrieved. Soon, we will have a much clearer idea of the people who once inhabited the land down under. Do you have any theories about these mysterious artifacts? If so, let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!